Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Ground and Pound podcast, the show where, as always, we're hitting you with them elbows of knowledge. And Carlos and I today are going to talk a little bit about the matchup coming in the future, hopefully near future, of Islam Makhachev moving up to 170, relinquishing his belt at 155 and fighting Jack Della Maddalena, the new champion of the welterweight division. And obviously this fight is something that's on the cards later on down the line, and Carlos and I are going to talk about the matchup, how we see the fight going, how we see Islam moving up, and how Jack's going to be able to fend off the unstoppable force that has been Islam Makhachev. And I'm going to pass this one over to you, Carlos, to get us started. How do you see this fight going, and what do you think about this potential matchup in the future?
Well, Islam, I'm a fan of both. They're both very good. I'll watch them fight any day. But Islam is kind of seen as being like Khabib 2.0, because he has some striking abilities along with the ground game as well. But to me, after round one, his striking is kind of moot. I don't think he's able to do the damage that he wants to do after round one. You know what I mean? So he fades a lot when it comes to the pop on his shots. But at 170, who knows what he's got? Like maybe that extra weight gets his cardio up. Maybe the extra weight allows him to hold down his opponents and keep him up against the cage. And maybe it gives him a little extra pop, a little extra zing on his punches that could put someone out. We've seen that happen in the past with DC, being able to move up to heavyweight and knock guys out with one shot. So you never know how that extra weight at 170 is going to be. And hopefully, because you're usually, I think he gets up to, from what I had heard, around the 190, 185, that's all the speculation you hear online. And it's like being at 170, maybe that's a benefit to him because he trains at a higher weight most of the time. He's known for manhandling guys, and maybe he'll be able to do that with JDM with the extra weight. He's obviously manhandling bigger guys in the gym, like Luke Rockhold as well, but JDM is also a very big 170. You know what I mean? Like he's not going to be that guy that you can just throw around as we've seen from Bilal Muhammad. Maybe he waited too late in the fight to implement the takedown after JDM got some confidence. But you could see Bilal obviously had some issues. I do think Makhachev is a better wrestler than Bilal is, but you could see that Maddalena can pose problems. He can actually get up without using the cage crawl. So maybe he can do that also against Makhachev. But the main thing is when they get back up to the feet, what exactly can Makhachev do to hurt Maddalena? I don't think he can do anything to hurt Maddalena, to be honest with you. Just going off what we know now. I think that JDM actually can do a lot more damage on the feet because Makhachev gets visibly tired midway through round two. And we're talking about a 5-round fight. And he slows down around that round. I'll even say round three. I'll give him round two. Round three, he gets tired. What are you going to do after you get tired and you got to fight a guy who's naturally bigger than you and physically bigger than you, and he's coming after you on the feet? At that point, Makhachev's striking is just cosmetic. He's just going to throw a jab out there and hope that JDM backs off. But he's not going to back off. You've seen that nose. That doesn't look like a guy that backs off from any strike. It looks like he eats it and throws one, and that's what he's going to do. And he throws in combination. He actually mixes and kicks very well when he's in close to those elbows. So I don't know. I don't know how Islam does in this matchup. And to be honest with you, I feel the edge goes to Maddalena because he's at that weight class. He can hit. He's got good cardio and conditioning. He can push a pace. But Makhachev, the number one thing for me is his cardio. Where is his cardio going to be? And if it stays the same as it was when he was at 155, he's going to have a lot of trouble in this matchup.
Who are you picking in the matchup? If you had to go out on a limb, gun to your head, who are you putting all the chips on?
I'm going to have to go Makhachev because I feel that he's a higher level wrestler and he can hold him down. And I think the 170 is going to add a little bit more conditioning for him. He's not going to have to suck down that extra 15 pounds.
Yeah, that's a nice segue for me to talk about what I wanted to talk about in this matchup for sure. And I think that what Carlos just said at the end is going to be the deciding factor here, especially for me. We've seen, I don't disagree with anything that Carlos said, especially his take on Islam. I do think Islam slows down as fights goes on, and maybe that's because he's a big 155er. Obviously, moving up might help him, it might hurt him. We don't know. We've seen in the past guys who don't necessarily cut all the weight that they don't fight the same when they have that extra weight on them. So it'll be interesting to see how Makhachev does with the weight cut, how he feels, how that impacts his cardio. I think that realistically is going to decide this fight, because when you look at skill for skill and you look at the wrestling credentials of Makhachev, it's not just the blast doubles, it's not just the singles, it's the trips, it's the sambo, it's to get you up against the fence and play, kind of foot sweeps and things like that. That's going to give JDM a lot of problems. And like Carlos mentioned as well, in the past, Luke Rockholtz talked about how Islam's been able to dominate him in the training room, in the grappling, in the wrestling. So I don't necessarily think that he's going to have to worry too much about being able to get JDM to the ground. I think realistically it's going to be, can he get JDM to the ground in rounds 4 and 5? What's his cardio going to look like in rounds 4 and 5? The way that I've always broke down JDM is that I think that his takedown defense isn't necessarily the best. I think people in the past, have shown Basil Hofez has tried to take him down and succeeded. In the Gilbert Burns fight, Gilbert Burns was able to get crucial takedowns in rounds 1 and 2 against JDM, which were able to win rounds 1 and 2, and ultimately get the knee, which was a well-timed knee, not taking anything away from Jack Della Maddalena, but he got taken down before that sequence happened as well. And none of those people I just mentioned, Gilbert Burns, even Bilal Muhammad, was able to try to go for takedowns late and wasn't able to get them. But none of those people I mentioned, Basil Hofez, Gilbert Burns, Bilal Muhammad, none of those people are the high-level credentialed grappling of the Dagestani wrestler in Islam Makhachev. So the way that I see this fight playing out is quite simple. I think we see a lot of wrestling here from Islam Makhachev early. I think he's going to look to try to get a finish in rounds 1 through 3. Maybe go for the submission on the ground, maybe ground and pound to soften him up in order to try to get the submission. Now, if we see this fight get extended and we see rounds 4 and 5, I definitely think JDM would be live. I think if he works the body throughout the fight while he's on the feet, I think that's going to give him a lot of success, especially with, kind of pouring away at the gas tank of Islam Makhachev, which we know in the past has been an issue. I don't necessarily think that we've seen Islam, get cracked and have to take shots from bigger guys, which is also a big factor here. It's a big difference when you know that guys like Volkanovski are throwing back at you. Not necessarily the most high-powered guys who are known for their one-shot knockout power. When you're taking shots from them, he knows he can take those shots. But how does he take shots against a guy at 170 with the power and the finishing ability of JDM? I would go with Makhachev. I would probably lean very strongly to Makhachev, just because I think that the wrestling is going to be a big factor. We've seen him be able to get takedowns against Volkanovski late in fights. I think that the weight cut has always been part of the reason that he's had gas tank issues. But it would be a very interesting matchup. I know the UFC wants to do this matchup just purely because it was in the works before JDM even got the belt. They were talking about, Islam dropping the belt and moving on and going up to 170. And it's something that he's talked about many times. So it's obviously been something on his mind. I'm sure that they're going to have a great game plan, him and Khabib, with the weight cut, or the lack of weight cut, I should say, how they go about doing, the training and how they implement it. Do they go in for a lot of strength and conditioning, how they do a lot more cardio, however they approach it? I'm sure it'll be on point, but give me Islam here. I think that the wrestling will be the factor, and I think that maybe the wrestling early will also take the pop away from JDM later on in the fight. I do think that if this fight sees round 4 and 5, JDM will definitely be live for a finish, but I think Islam's wrestling overall is going to wear on JDM and ultimately get him the victory if he doesn't get a submission on the ground first. But is there anything else that you want to say about this matchup, Carlos?
Well, his submission game, like you just said, is where I think he might be able to get a finish if he can get him down. One of the things I was very impressed with was that whenever he has to get up, whether it was against Gilbert Burns or Bilal Muhammad or Basil Hafez, is the fact that he doesn't need to be against the cage to get back up. He could do it from the middle of the ring. And the reason he could do that is because Maddalena is pretty much like Gumby. He can just throw his legs in one direction. And what's interesting is his shoulders are still on the mat, but his knees can hit the mat at the same time. And then he'll spin his body and work his way up to his knees. And it's a very interesting technique. I've seen it before with very flexible people, and it's very hard to keep someone that's like Gumby, in one spot because he can stretch his body anywhere. It'll be up to Makhachev to be like, I've got to hold control here and I've got to hold control here to be able to keep him down. And if anybody can do that, it's Makhachev because, the pressure they have in each position is meant to keep people in one spot. But most of the time when they do that, it's against the cage and not in the middle of the octagon. So now that it's against the cage, he's got something where he can walk back up to, he can lean on to do the cage walk, and now he can find a way to get to his knees to get back to his feet. Within that transition or scramble is where Islam's going to have to look for some type of submission, which with someone like Makhachev it's live. It can happen at a moment's notice. At the snap of a finger, he can throw on a submission and boom, you're done. So there's a lot that he's got to look out for in this matchup. But like you stated, and I stated as well, is when it gets to rounds 4 and 5, I'm even going to add in round 3. What is he going to look like when they get back to their feet? Because Maddalena, I think, is going to get up. What's going to happen when they're back on their feet? Is Islam going to have to make a desperate dive to get back to the ground? And if you do that out of desperation and you're tired, is the technique there to finish it? Is the energy there to get the drive to push them to the ground? That's where it's a toss-up for me.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with every sentiment that you have, and I think that's why I even mentioned as well. Like, I think that the weight cut for Islam at 155 has always been that issue, I think, for his gas tank. So I'm assuming that him not having to do that drastic weight cut as a very bulky 155er will then pay dividends in his performance here at 170. But we've given you what we think. We've let you know what we think about this matchup. We want to hear from you in the comments section below. Let us know who you guys have. Do you think JDM's going to be able to pull off the upset here against the Russian powerhouse in Islam Makhachev? Or do you think the wrestling is going to be too much here from Islam at the move up and being able to get the belt here at welterweight? Let us know what you think in the comments section. We want to hear from you. Let us know if you think we're full of shit. Let us know if you think that you agree with our points. Let us know in the comments section. Hit that like and subscribe button on the video, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Peace.